Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, December 3rd, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what we've been up to at the water cooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris, Evangelista.
Hello.
It's officially December, guys. We're officially in, I guess, Christmas time, even though I've had a Christmas tree up since October. But let's just jump into what we've been up to. Let's start first with Jacob. What have you been doing?
Yes, I spent a great deal of my weekend finalizing my office. More than a year after moving into my house, my office is finally ready to be used on a regular basis. I installed a light and a ceiling fan, which is the worst process in the world, and I hate it so much. I did a reworking of the various books and shelves. Previously, I had some areas where they were so jam-packed some doors had a hard time opening, so I had to re-spread things out. And I documented a lot of the results on Twitter. If you go to my Twitter, at Jacob Hall, you can see all the shelf porn I posted. A lot of people wanted to see more shelves, so I indulged them in myself. It's one of the things when we moved into this house, we decided rather than have a central library as we had in previous apartments, we wanted to rather have one room crammed full. Every room in the house now has books. Even the bathrooms have books. So I posted a lot of pictures of my office and of where all the various books in the house ended up. And I'll put that link in the show notes. And out of that, I finished my Christmas shopping. I went straight out with a plan one day, spent half of Saturday hitting up various stores, and I am done. No more rushing, no more worrying, completely set. So I'm ready to just have December happen to me as opposed to try to fight against it.
And you also took a photo of the infamous book that we speak about every week here on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
We'll link an image of that in the show notes in the more section for people who want to check that out. Because it was much different than I was imagining. I was imagining it being like this really large book, this old tome, and it looks very new and modern.
I know, it's a recent reprinting of apparently an older book. But if it was an older tome, it would be a cool thing, Peter. Instead, it's this super tacky-looking, like, bad graphic design cover, which makes it even worse. It makes it even more nightmarish. Like, if it looked old, it looked like a tome, I'd treasure it instead of, like, treat it as the piece of awfulness that it is.
A few weeks ago on this water cooler podcast, Jacob talked about getting a weighted blanket, and I was browsing the aisles at Target, I think the same night as we recorded that water cooler episode, and at Target, one of the end caps, they were selling weighted blankets. So I took that as a sign, and I bought it. And for the last few weeks, I've been using this weighted blanket, and I have to agree with Jacob. It is very comforting. It is very calming. It's a blanket. For those of you who didn't hear, it's a blanket that has like these weighted beads, so it has a lot of weight to it on top of you. If I have only one complaint, I'm not sure if you have the same one, Jacob. Did you buy it at Target?
I know about mine on Amazon.
If there's only one complaint I have, is mine's a little small. Like it doesn't always cover my whole body depending on how I'm laying. But anyways, that's probably getting too minute. The other thing I did this week, actually a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned on this podcast, I am on a weird diet called the keto diet, which means I am eating a lot of fat and a lot of protein, but not a lot of very little amount of carbs. That usually means that I'm eating a lot of fatty meat. And one of my friends that's also on this diet subscribed to this service called Butcher Box, which I'm not sure if you guys heard of, but it's basically like this one of the subscription boxes. It comes every month, and I got my first package of meat. It's literally like a box filled with dry ice and lots of meat. It's like Chris's worst nightmare, and I gotta say, I'm really enjoying this as a carnivore and as a person who is continuing to lose the weight on this diet. It is weird to receive this cardboard box filled with just like slices of meat. But
kind of serial killer-ish.
Yeah. But and I'm not even sure you get a better deal on it than you would if you went to like Costco or something. But like the selections of meat have all been amazing. it saves me the time to go to the grocery store and, drag it home. Which, by the way, I hate to put Ben on the spot here, but
yes.
Ben, last week you talked about joining Amazon Fresh.
Yes.
And then I saw this Instagram story from your wife that said something like you had ordered 2 peppers and they delivered.
Yeah, so she said she ended up making hot sauce because we had ordered serrano peppers to make chili, and the smallest amount that you could order cost like 87 cents or something. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was less than $1 just for serrano peppers. And it was like, we weren't sure exactly how many were going to come, but we were like, we only need a couple for this chili. And so we used 3 for the chili, and there were 20 delivered in total. So she used the remaining 17 to make the hot sauce that is very, very hot, but very good. So yeah, that's what happened there.
So how are you liking Amazon Fresh so far? I mean, I thought it was going to be a bigger disaster, but that sounds like you spent very little with big results right there.
Yeah, we're just, I think she was looking for a way to avoid just throwing out the ones that we didn't need, and just made hot sauce, even though we didn't even really need it for anything. But I guess it stays good in the fridge for like months on end. So we got some hot sauce, guys. If anybody wants some, I can ship it out to you or something. But it's going pretty great so far. I mean, we've only had it for like just over a week at this point, and I think we've already used it 3 times. My same complaints are from the original time I talked about it stand, where like the selection it doesn't have everything that we always get, but the convenience aspect of it is really great so far.
Very cool. So you'd recommend that so far, and I would also recommend ButcherBox. I'll put a link to that in the show notes if in case you're wondering what that is. You can get some free bacon if you sign up right now. Anyways, HT, what have you been up to?
So I got to cover the Aquaman press junket in New York. And for those who don't know, a press junket is something that is with the press tour that includes the cast and director, in which they do interviews and a press conference to promote the film. It doesn't come out till later in the month, but so we got to see them a little early and see a screening early, which I'll talk about later. But at the press conference, we got to see James Wan, Jason Momoa, Amber Heard, and Patrick Wilson speak about the film and the making of the film. And we also got to witness Jason Momoa seeing his Madame Tussauds wax mannequin for the first time. And it was a hilarious experience because he had never seen it before. And he just walks up and like there's a sparkle in his eyes just seeing like this Aquaman figure that looks very uncannily like him. It's bizarre how accurate it is. And he posed with it. I think he posted a few pictures on his Instagram of him posing with it. He liked it a lot, so he kept talking about it. And so that was a really cool experience. And I have a write-up that I posted that went up this morning, actually.
Was this your first press junket that you've ever been to? Yes, I guess. Well, I've been to like a few. I went to like when I did that Coco early day thing. So that was sort of a press junket thing. So this is like, I guess this is my first in New York. It was very exciting. So, and like they had a really cool setup there too. Not only did they have like the mannequin that you could pose with your own little trident, they had a little area where you could take a video and be in your own Aquaman trailer, which I took and showed to the Slash on Slack, and no one else can see it. I haven't even sent it to my friends. So why not? It's hilarious.
It's really bad. I was like, I'm doing one cheesy thing for the day, and that's it. So we'll see. Might get unearthed one day. And then like they had all these cool props and just items from and costumes from the movie as well as a bunch of people who were dressed up as Atlanteans who they kind of paraded around before the press conference started, which was really interesting. But it was a cool press junket, and I enjoyed it's like talking and hearing what went into the film and seeing how Jason Momoa is in person, which is basically like how you see him in Aquaman. He's just this bro who was wearing like torn up khakis at this conference while Amber Heard was dressed in like this tailored suit. It was very funny, but they were all very cool, and I enjoyed the experience of it.
When can we expect your interviews from this press day on the site?
So the interviews will be going up on the week of the movie's release, but the write-up for the press conference is up online now.
And you also ran into Mary Poppins on the way out of the press junket, I heard?
Yeah, I did not know like any official thing was happening, but I saw Emily Blunt at like the elevator at the same hotel where this Aquaman junket was happening. Like, oh, that's weird. Maybe she's here, with John Krasinski because like they live in New York. So I didn't really think of it. But then a little bit later, I saw Ben Whishaw, who is also in Mary Poppins Returns. And I was like, oh, they must be having a conference or junket here at the same time as well. And I accidentally locked eyes with Ben Whishaw. So that was a cool moment.
He knows who you are.
Yeah, apparently.
Brad, what have you been up to?
I'm still in Utah. But I'm going back tomorrow, and my girlfriend's birthday was this past weekend. So we had a little bit of fun with her friends and family to celebrate. And on Saturday, that involved going to this cool place that no one really had actually been to before, even though everyone else who is around for her birthday lives here. It's this place called Topgolf.
Oh, I've heard of that. That's like a chain.
Yeah.
One of the YouTubers I follow, Tim Tracker, always goes to the one in Orlando. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'm not somebody who really likes golf very much. I'm not very good at it. I don't mind going to a driving range, like every now and then. But it's been years since I picked up a golf club and actually hit any balls. But this place looked really cool because it's a driving range, but it's one of those multi-level driving ranges. But there's some added fun to it because out in the middle of the driving range where you're hitting your balls are these big targets that you are trying to aim for, which is really difficult if you're not very good at golf at all. But what's cool is that, it's such a big area, and like even if you hit your balls haphazardly, the targets are so big that there's a good chance that your ball is going to end up rolling into one of them anyway. And what's cool is they have this whole high-tech system in place where every single ball you hit is tracked by their system so that they know exactly where it goes and where it lands in the target, and it keeps track of your points for you on this like computer screen, these big TV monitors that they have at the bays where you and your group are set up. And even though it's actually really cold here in Utah right now, because this is an outdoor thing, they have such a great heating system at these bays that it didn't feel chilly at all. It was in like the mid 30s, and we had our jackets off, and we were hitting balls, and we didn't feel cold at all. So it's a really cool place to go. It's really fun. Everyone enjoyed it. And these are all people who aren't necessarily, great golfers or anything. It's just kind of a fun way to pass the time, and it's something really unique because there's not really anything else like it except for what Topgolf does. So it was really fun.
Well, I would like to check that out sometime. Maybe when I'm in Florida next.
They have them in Austin. Come down to Austin, Peter.
They have them in Austin too.
Oh yeah, it's impossible to have like been to a social function in Austin without being to Topgolf at least once. Everybody does Topgolf in Austin.
They have one in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where my parents are. And I think my mom was talking about trying to get our family together and take us to go check one out for the first time when I go back to visit them later this month. So maybe I'll have my own recap scenario on a future edition of the water cooler.
I've also seen at these Topgolf places, they have like crazy food. Brad, did you consume any crazy food there? I know I'm jumping ahead, but I don't think I saw anything in what you've been eating from Topgolf.
No, we didn't have anything crazy. We did get a couple appetizers that were pretty good. I guess one thing you could say was kind of crazy, but not really. We did this plate of, it's an appetizer plate, and it comes with this huge pretzel. But then inside each of the holes that are between the pretzel bread, essentially, was like a charcuterie of cheese and meats and stuff like that. So that was pretty good, and the pretzel was big, and the assembly of the different food inside of the pretzel space itself was pretty tasty. But otherwise, we didn't have anything like outlandish or anything. I actually didn't even get a chance to look at the menu. My girlfriend actually just picked a couple appetizers that everyone just was able to eat while we were playing.
Damn, why is land in LA so expensive, and why can't we have a Topgolf in LA? Not that I'm even a golfer or a physical person of any kind, but for some reason, this looks like a lot of fun. Let's move on to what we've been reading. Jacob, you also got the book that I got for my birthday this year, Stranger Things Worlds Turned Upside Down. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm not as big of a Stranger Things fan as you are, Peter. I like the show quite a bit. I think I admire it more than I love it. But this book, like, it's saying to me from the shelf. I'm already a fan of those of lavish, slightly too large making of books for like film and television. And this one really leans into the Stranger Things aesthetic because it is made to look like a used book from the 80s. It's been through better days. The cover is intentionally torn and worn. Everything is scratched. It's been encased in plastic wrap for protection, in quotation marks. It has a used book, like fair condition sticker on the cover of it. So it looks like an artifact. It looks like something that was written in the 80s and existed in the 80s and has not been always taken care of very well, even though it's all intentional and the book is brand new. And it's a really, really cool thing. I'm just impressed by the aesthetics of it. Just holding it and admiring it from that perspective was just a very cool thing. And as someone who, as you saw from the photos that we posted in the show notes of my book collection, I like books. I like unique books that anybody can pull down and admire and flip through. And the best thing about a book like this is that, you can pull it down, admire it, and look through it. You can open to a random page of this book and find some cool Stranger Things trivia. It's pretty much a look at the making of the first 2 seasons. There's commentary on every aspect of the show's production. It's not as in-depth as other books that I've seen. It doesn't break down every single episode in like incredible detail like other books I've seen for TV shows have. But if you're a fan of Stranger Things and you want to know more, or you just like cool books about production of film and television, it's a very nifty thing. I'm definitely won over by what they did here. And if they do one for seasons 3 and 4 in a similar fashion, like they do for Game of Thrones releases a new like making of art book every 2 seasons, then I'll definitely pick up the Stranger Things Volume 2 a version of this book. What do you think, Peter? I think you probably read more than I have. I've sort of just skimmed it a little bit.
I've only just skimmed it too. It's like one of those good coffee table books where what you said, you just kind of like skim to a certain page. I love the design of this thing. Like the back of the even the dust jacket has like scribblings from the kids, like a drawing, and like there's things to find and explore. And but I feel like the content is more surface level than I would have liked. But from a design perspective, I just love it. There's like a whole section on the movies that inspired Stranger Things and the books of Stephen King that inspired Stranger Things, which the layout of those pages are just like, I don't know. I wish we could get more things on movies and TV presented in that kind of visual glory. But I've not read too far into it, so I can't give a full review. Let's move on to what we've been watching, because I think we've all been watching a lot of stuff. I attended the world premiere of Mary Poppins Returns. I talked about that on the last week's podcast. I was very disappointed in this film. I think it's just not for me. I know most people are probably going to enjoy it, but I found it kind of boring. And that's in the context of seeing a film at a world premiere where everybody is excited, everybody's dressed up, you have the best laughter, you have claps throughout the film. To dislike a film in those kind of settings, almost like, film festival premiere level settings, is very hard. but this movie accomplished it for me. So, you know what, guys? I am sad to admit, I went to my Letterboxd profile and I did a count of how many movies I've seen this year, and I'm embarrassed of this number, but I'm about to reveal this number to the world. I know this number is going to probably discredit me in some ways, but I've only seen 50 movies this year. 50 2018 releases this year, I should say. And looking at that, and I was talking in the Slack channel, and I think, Chris, how many movies have you seen this year of 2018 releases?
A lot. I already forgot what it was. It's something like, it's close to 300.
Like, I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that, I went to Sundance this year and got sent home before the festival started. And usually, I end up seeing 15, 20 movies there. Maybe it's, this year, was my first year as a member of the Magic Castle. So maybe I've been spending time there rather than in movies. Maybe I've been watching more TV shows than movies this year because TV's so good. But I'm so disappointed in myself that I have not seen that many movies. So I've been made it a goal for myself in December to try to catch up as much as I can. So what I'm about to relay is a bunch of stuff I watched over the weekend, starting with Paddington 2, which I know I've been delayed on that. I had watched Paddington 1 a while back, but Paddington 2 was not available for free or for on one of the services that I pay for until recently. It's been recently on HBO, I believe. And the film is just as delightful and as great as, all of you said it was. So, I have nothing to add there. I saw Roma, which is the Alfonso Cuarón Netflix movie. I saw it exactly how he wanted it to be presented. I saw it projected from a DVD screener on my 150-inch projector screen, which looked awful. And I was regretting every moment of it because this film, it's such a beautiful shot movie. Like, the cinematography is just so great. Wonderful long shots, long pans and side dollies, and the story, hit me emotionally. It's great. I don't think maybe it's in my top 5 of the year, but it's probably in my top 10. It's up there. It's I would recommend it to anybody. It's a film you should see. If you can see it on the big screen, unlike me, I think it's projecting in 70 millimeter in some of the big cities. So do that if you can. I also saw a screener of Vice, and I largely agree with what Chris had to say about this film. It's infuriating. I think it actually might be one of my it might be my favorite of McKay's political films. I love his comedy touches on it. I love the conceit of the narrator. And there's some clever things he does within the film. It's such a I know the same thing could be said of maybe the Mr. Rogers documentary, but like watching this, it's amazing to see what kind of impact one person can have on this world. And this would be in the opposite of Mr. Rogers, in the negative way. It's has one of the best end credit scenes ever, I think. And I did like Christian Bale as the lead character. I did not like Sam Rockwell as W. Chris, did you like him as W? I know he's getting a lot of award buzz.
I thought he was great. I mean, he's not in it as much as you might think he would be, but I thought he did a good job. I thought he was fine.
Yeah. I also finally caught Minding the Gap. This is a film that I lost the summer movie wager this year on this last filmcast. And this is the film that David Chen wanted everybody to watch. And this film is a documentary. It follows... How did you describe this? Okay, so the director Bing Liu, he shot his friends' skateboarding videos with his friends, and he basically has returned. He has all this footage over the years of his friends, and he's returned to kind of catch up with what's going on with his friends now that they are becoming adults. And because of his friendship with these people, he is allowed such intimate, access to their lives, and such a very personal conversation of not even just his friends, but even him and his mom's relationship. Honestly, I think this is one of my favorite movies this year. I would highly recommend seeing a double feature of mid-90s, the Jonah Hill film, and then Mind the Gap, which I do think Mind the Gap probably is a little bit better, but I think that's a good second part for a double feature with those two films. And what else did I watch? I watched another documentary called Shirkers. This one is on Netflix, so you can actually watch this now on Netflix. Minding the Gap, I believe, is on Hulu. So Shirkers is on Netflix, and Shirkers is this documentary by Sandy Tan. Won the Documentary Directors Award at Sundance Film Festival for this movie. When she was younger, 2 decades ago, she shot a feature film in Singapore. And she shot it with this film teacher. And after shooting this feature film, the footage mysteriously went missing, as did the film teacher that directed the film with her. And for 2 decades, she didn't know what had happened. It's kind of like, this is kind of a detective story about filmmaking. It's a snapshot of Singapore 2 decades ago. It's I don't know. It's about I don't know. It's hard to say what this is about without spoiling it, but I would highly recommend it. It's kind of it's so creatively presented. You can see why she won the Sundance Award. It's just I highly recommend that as well. And lastly, I went to the theater to see Bohemian Rhapsody, which I know has been critically savaged. It seems like mainstream America seems to like this movie a lot more than critics. This movie is kind of a paint-by-numbers musical biopic of Freddie Mercury. It's everything you think it's going to be, and it doesn't do anything really inventive, isn't particularly introspective. It's full of those moments of like, oh, the audience is in on it. Like, executives arguing over if Bohemian Rhapsody, the song, is too long to become a #1 single. And, the whole audience is like laughing at that. And, I am a big fan of Queen's music. I didn't really know much about the people in Queen themselves and their story. So I did learn a lot from this, but I don't feel like I learned that much. That said, I know that sounds like a bad review. That said, this was such an enjoyable movie. I don't know. Maybe it's that, it has all the songs we love, and it's I don't know. It's hard to describe why I like it, because honestly, like, me saying everything I just said about the movie, it seems like I should not like the movie. It's not like it's an exceptional movie of any kind. It is not. But I do think critics are being maybe a little too hard on it, and I don't know.
That's exactly what I said when I saw it back when it first came out, is that I don't think it's terrible by any means. It's definitely cliche, and it's full of biopic tropes, and it could have been better, but I had a lot of fun watching it. It's a very entertaining, movie, and it could have been deeper and better, absolutely. But yeah, I had fun watching it too.
Yeah, and I almost feel bad because obviously it's directed by Bryan Singer. The film does weirdly have like a bunch of cases where it's like attacking critics and journalists in media. So I'm wondering if that had anything to play into it other than it being kind of a cliche movie. But I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching too far. The last thing I wanted to talk about is there's this new Netflix series called Death by Magic, which is a new magic television show on Netflix. It's basically the premise of this is the host, DMC, who's this magician, is going to places in the world where a magician died performing magic, be it a bullet catch, be it an escape on train tracks, whatever. He's attempting to recreate those tricks and to honor those deaths in a great way. It's not good. So maybe you can avoid it. I'm probably going to have to watch it. I'm going to have to hate watch it because I like magic and I want to, there's some good in it. Like, he's a good magician, but it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's like overly produced and it's not great. So I wouldn't recommend any of you watch this series, Death by Magic. I would say watch the Justin Willman Magic for Humans show on Netflix instead. I think that's a much more enjoyable series. Jacob, what have you been watching?
I'll start off by talking about the movie that I thought would be homework, and it wasn't, and I felt so happy to enjoy it as much as I did. And that is The Favorite, the new film by Yorgos Lanthimos, the director of Dogtooth and The Lobster. And I don't know why I thought this was going to be like a tough sit, because I really like his previous movies. It just at a glance, it looks like a costume drama, and I'm not always big on those 18th century people in palaces having relationships movies. Except this is the ultimate version of people in a palace having relationships, except that it treats the royal court of Queen Anne of England as if it was the worst possible high school. This movie is Mean Girls, except every mean girl has political power and is affecting the course of a nation. It is such a bitchy, mean, dark, cruel little movie where the characters are all so mean to each other, and it's while being so funny. And the way the movie is about Queen Anne, played by a really spectacular Olivia Colman. She's not very effective as a ruler. She lets Sarah, played by Rachel Weisz, her second in command, essentially make all of her decisions for her. And then Sarah's cousin, Abigail, played by Emma Stone, shows up, gets a job in the palace, and they both start competing for the affections of Anne, and both start trying to be her favorite, so to speak. And things spiral to dark, funny, tragic places. And while it's rooted in history, it also makes some suggestions based on what people think may have been a case between these three women and what may or may not be true, but it doesn't matter because emotionally it all makes sense. And I can't wait to see it again, because there are certain acts of cruelty that in retrospect are actually kindness, and there are acts of kindness that in retrospect are actually cruelty. And seeing who feels what at what point and who's being honest with each other it's like a puzzle. You're trying to figure out who actually cares about who and who is trying to step ahead of each other. And Lanthimos is such a bleak filmmaker. He does not believe in human beings. He does not believe in relationships. He does not believe in our capacity to do good. So The Favorite is very much a bleak, dark sitting, and it ends in a way that will leave a lot of people frustrated because he does not want to wrap things up in a tidy bow. But I was enraptured by this movie. It is so beautiful to look at, and the divisiveness between how much it looks like a costume drama, like a typical costume drama with these lavish sets and lavish costumes, with the characters saying the crudest, cruelest, funniest, and meanest things possible. I was laughing and gasping throughout the whole thing. I had such a great time with The Favorite. It is a lock for my best of the year list. Has anybody else seen this movie? Because I was blown away by how much I liked it.
No, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think I'm going to see it sometime this week.
Yeah, I think of all the Slash Film staff, HG, you're the one I think is going to like really
I'm so
get
excited for it. I love The Lobster and I love period dramas, so.
See, I hate period dramas, but Jacob is making me want to watch this movie. And I have a feeling I'm not going to like it, but should I do it, Jacob?
I'm very curious, Peter, because like I said, it's very much a comedy, and it's very, very much dark comedy. So and it's using costume drama tropes in ways you don't expect. Like there are, like for example, Nicholas Holt's character, who's also spectacular in this, even though the movie's very much about the three female leads who are wonderful and amazing. But Nicholas Holt plays this a Tory politician who's always at Queen Anne's court and always trying to push his agendas. And he's like in this extremely lavish costume with lavish makeup, but the movie makes him almost too lavish in his presentation. He reaches a point where the movie's aware of how ridiculous he looks at all times, and starts to push that to the point where you start realizing that the movie's very aware of how outlandish and preposterous and silly all these costumes are and how his outfits are. And Nicholas Hoult really leans into it, playing this essentially the high school jock of this royal court high school, and he's such a dick. He has a scene with Emma Stone where they take a walk and he berates her in ways that are just still rattling around my brain. So yeah, Peter, give it a shot. I think you may, if you've ever had a bad high school experience, you'll relate to The Favorite. I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this out then. What else have you been watching, Jacob?
Oh, because it's Christmas time, my wife and I watched the Great British Baking Show Christmas Special, or Great British Baking Show Holidays, I think it's called on Netflix. And these are just two one-off specials where they reunite various cast members from past seasons for single-episode competitions where they make Christmas-themed goods. And you know what? It's more Great British Baking Show. It is totally fine. It is sweet and nice, and it's fun to see some familiar faces back. It's not as good as the main series because there's not as much suspense. We don't spend 10 episodes, learning who each of these people are and watching them grow and change. But as far as 2 hours to kill in December, where you just want to be around nice people being nice and making nice things for 2 hours, I recommend it highly. I know Chris also watched this. Chris, what do you think about the holiday version of Great British Baking Show?
It was great. My only complaint is that there weren't more episodes. My wife and I watched this, I think it was Friday night, and it was over. We just, wanted more, and that was impossible. But, some is better than none, so we'll take what we can get.
Speaking of...
Let me guess. They make cookies and call them biscuits.
Oh, Peter.
On these episodes. They do that on other episodes, but not this one.
Okay.
We're going to get you to watch this show yet, Peter. It's going to calm your nerves.
I think Peter's anti-British food bias might be too much for this.
I just had so much bad British food while visiting London for 7. I don't know. I also don't like British baked goods, so maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm just biased. I'm too biased to enjoy this show, Jacob.
Well, Peter, then you're lost. You're missing one of pop culture's greatest treasures.
What else have you been watching?
To keep the Christmas train going, I watched Saint, 2010 Dutch horror movie. Or it's called Sint, I believe, is the actual European title. It's streamed on Hulu right now, and it's another in the long line of Killer Santa Claus movies. It's no Rare Exports right away. Rare Exports is the best Killer Santa movie of all time, and it won't be topped ever. But Saint is okay, and I mostly like it because it's very much grounded in regional traditions. It's very much like I'm watching this movie going, why are they doing that? What's going on? And we had to pause the movie and Google a few things because the traditions on display in this movie are so different than American holiday traditions that I was like just confused at first, but actually lent it this very specific flavor that I enjoyed more than some of the other movies' actual horror beats. Because it kind of runs out of steam in its back half. I mean, it's a little bit familiar. Killer Santa Claus returns. Army of servants exact revenge upon bad people, young and old. And it has some really good moments. And like I said, the cultural specificity of it is a lot of fun. But I just feel like there are such better and more satisfying movies about, hey, Santa Claus is actually real and he actually does harm. I think Rare Exports and Krampus from a few years ago are both far better films. But, for an 85-minute movie streaming on Hulu, that's totally watchable. Sint or Saint is perfectly fine. Chris, have you seen this? Because I feel like you and I are the big horror guys here.
I have seen this. It's not good. I don't even remember really what. I just remember I did watch it one year around the holidays, and I can barely recall what happened in it. So for me to not remember like a single thing is a bad sign. I just know I watched it.
Well, to complete my Christmas trilogy, I watched half of, because I did not finish, the Christmas Chronicles, the Kurt Russell as Santa Claus family adventure movie that Netflix made. It is garbage. It is a very bad movie. It feels like it was made for Hallmark. And Kurt Russell, bless his heart, is doing everything he can as this really tough, kind of cool blue-collar Santa who I really like this depiction of Santa Claus where he's less of an all-knowing, mystical, winking being and more of a down-to-earth working man who has access to magic. And that's a really, really cool take. But he's surrounded by these really terrible child actors, and the plot is they mess up his sleigh while trying to film Santa, and they have to save Christmas. And it really feels like a really bad TV movie starring Kurt Russell. And because Netflix is on it, and because it stars Kurt Russell, people are going to watch this a lot more often than they would have if it premiered on Hallmark or one of the other channels. But that's where it belongs. I mean, I was halfway through. I just turned to my wife and said, "Can we turn this off? I'm done with this." And we did. But Chris, what do you think? I know you watched this too.
Yeah, it's not great. Kurt Russell, I think Kurt Russell makes it worth watching alone just because he's clearly having fun and he looks really cool as Santa Claus for some reason. Like, I don't know how that happened, but he looks like a really cool Santa. So that makes it kind of worth watching. But I actually kind of liked it for the reasons you're listing, because it's so bad that, like, there's this young girl and she's clearly way too old for what her character is supposed to be. Like, she still believes in Santa, but you could tell this actress is probably like 16, but she's playing someone much younger, and it really shows because she overdoes everything. So I kind of just had fun watching how like terrible it was. So I don't want to go so far as to say it's so bad it's good, because it's not, but I found it at least partially watchable. Like, it didn't make me like want to throw something at the TV. So that's a plus, I guess.
And finally, I saw Suspiria again before it left theaters, because that movie is incredible. And seeing it again confirmed that it is incredible. And I feel like most people are going to find this movie on Amazon Prime, where it's going to live forever. And watching at home is going to be fine, but seeing in theaters, surrounded by people, was for me the way to see this movie, because being in an audience of people trying to figure out what is going on as they watch Suspiria is part of the fun. But second viewing really does unlock the movie's mysteries, really does unlock what it's about. I feel like I can really talk about it now. If we ever want to have a conversation about Suspiria on this podcast, I'm equipped to do it now, which I wasn't after my first viewing. Second time through, you're less overwhelmed by it and less thrown off by the speed at which it does not. It's a movie that manages to be extremely fast in that it is running through information very quickly, but very slow in that it's paced deliberately. So it's a very, very odd combination of things, and you're just trying to grapple with it your first time through. But second time through, it clicked in a way that I knew I liked it the first time I watched it, and I liked it again. It's very unfortunate that Suspiria opened the same year as Mandy, because otherwise it would be my number one movie of 2018. But yeah, my number one and two, my second favorite movie of the year, right behind Mandy. Wow. The rest of my list right now is a toss-up, but those two are locked in.
Well, Suspiria and The Favorite you can see in theaters right now. The Great British Baking Show Holiday and The Christmas Chronicles on Netflix. And Saint, you said on Hulu?
It is on Hulu.
Yes. Chris, what have you been watching?
Well, other than the stuff that we already talked about, I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. There was a screening of it for me over the weekend, and my review is up now on slashfilm.com, and I encourage everyone to go read it and write "Chris, you're the best" in the comment section. But I loved it. It really does live up to the hype. I don't want to say I went into this movie expecting the worst, because I don't go into any movie that way. I always hope for every movie I'm seeing to be good. But even with all the buzz, I was like, all right, there's no way this movie is that good. And it really is. It really is that good. And this is like, if you're like me, where you don't mind superhero movies, but you're kind of burned out on them, and you're kind of thinking like, enough, this is going to rekindle your faith in that medium, because this film does what other superhero movies they're not doing what this movie is doing. And this movie's having fun with things. It's using its medium in ways other films can't. Like, the fact that it's animated allows it to do all these things that live action movies can't. And it's a blast. It's so much fun. It's so entertaining. It's incredibly funny. I know it sounds like I'm overselling it, but this movie really is as good as everyone is saying. So I highly recommend Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
You called it the best superhero movie this year?
Absolutely. It's better than everything else that came out. I mean, Black Panther was great, but this is better. Infinity War was fine. Ant-Man I already forgot I saw, so I don't really care about that. But this is hands down the best superhero movie of the year, in my opinion.
I think this will actually be in my top 5 films of this year, period. So, Ben, you also saw this movie.
I did, and it is also almost certainly going to be in my top 5. I loved it. I want to echo everything Chris just said. I think it's probably the best Spider-Man story that has ever been put on film thus far, and I know for a lot of people that's going to be a high bar, with like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 being up there as like one of the best Spider-Man movies for a lot of people for a long, long time. And this is better than that. It does things, like Chris was saying, with animation that you've never seen before. It does things with the story of Spider-Man that you've never seen before. It really like leans into. It's really great, because it's one of those things where if you know a ton about Spider-Man, you're gonna love it. But even if you don't, I feel like it gives you enough information to, if you've never seen basically what I'm trying to say is you only have to have a baseline knowledge of Spider-Man to really appreciate what this movie is doing. And I think everybody has that baseline knowledge just through pop culture osmosis. Like, it's not like you have to, some of the later Marvel movies, it almost feels like homework that you have to see the 17 movies that came before it or whatever. And this is not like that at all. It feels fresh and it's hilarious. That's one of the things that I think, it's one of the funniest movies this year I've found. Man, this movie is so great. I have a bunch of interviews coming in the next few weeks from the directors and from Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are the writer-producers on it. And I can't wait for you guys to read this stuff because this movie is amazing. I really want everybody to see it. And it's definitely one of the best films, period, in 2018.
Yeah, who's going to be the first person on Slash Film staff that doesn't love this movie?
I hope it's somebody like completely unexpected, like Brad. It's just like, nope, this movie's garbage. I don't know.
HT.
I'm so sad if I don't like that movie.
You're gonna love it. I can't imagine any of you guys are gonna dislike this movie. I don't think I've talked to one person that disliked this movie. HT, what have you been watching this past week? You finally saw Aquaman.
I did. I saw a screening of it ahead of the press junket I attended, and I
finally saw a movie that doesn't come out for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, you finally saw it, Peter. We're finally catching up with you. Whatever, Mr. Important. I live in LA and go to fancy screenings. But yeah, I saw it. And I also thought it was a blast. So it's not quite on the level of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I don't think it will be, but it is a wildly entertaining movie that I didn't anticipate having so much fun at. I think it definitely is because everyone in this movie is just having a ball. Jason Momoa is just having a great time, and this movie doesn't take itself too seriously at all. In fact, it's almost overwhelmingly sincere to the point that it becomes like almost self-parody at some points. Everything is on the nose, the dialogue, the music cues, the acting, and it's just something that feels sort of like a throwback. I know, Peter, you said it kind of felt like a Marvel Phase 1 movie, but it felt to me almost like
and not in a bad way.
Not in a bad way, yeah. It almost felt to me like an early 2000s, like Sam Raimi movie in the way that it was so sincere and just so like, it played everything straight and wasn't so like tongue in cheek, apart from like maybe some of the toilet jokes, which were kind of weird. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought Jason Momoa in particular was just so fun to watch. It had some pacing problems, and it definitely had some issues with some of the world building where in those parts felt like it dragged a little bit, but otherwise I thought it was a great film, a great superhero film, and surprisingly had great visuals as well, despite some of the sort of sketchy visuals you've seen in the trailers. James Wan does a great job of just like rendering this underwater world to life, and there are some moments that he kind of taps into his like horror aficionados that make for some really spectacular sequences. So I like Aquaman a lot, and I think that if you are not looking forward to it, you might be pleasantly surprised to see it.
Yeah, that underwater world looks like Avatar meets Tron Legacy with like the space battles of Star Wars. It's like insane. It's very ambitious what he's doing with that film. You also saw Creed 2?
Yes. So that's a movie I finally saw, catching up on that. And it's fine. It's a solid Rocky sequel, but I feel like Ryan Coogler's absence is keenly felt. There's not a lot of that electricity that I felt from the first Creed, and especially not even in parts in Michael B. Jordan's performance, who I feel like when he teams up with Ryan Coogler, just has this electricity and this like power to his performance. And here he was good, and this movie went in some really interesting places in how it delved into like masculinity and performative masculinity, especially pertaining to like black men in a sport where that is like very overwhelmingly aggressive. But I just didn't really feel myself like emotionally connecting to it as much as I did with the first Creed. And I think the montages too had something lacking as well. I didn't feel like that empowering emotion whenever the montages kicked in, except for at the end when the Dragos had their emotional like the catharsis. I found myself identifying a lot more with the Dragos than I thought I would, and I love them, and they're my favorite part of this film. So, while Michael B. Jordan's great, I will say the Dragos really stole the film for me.
I'm telling you, they should have made the Drago movie instead. Take that, Brad.
False.
What else have you been watching, HT?
So I got the chance to see Burning, which is a movie I've been really looking forward to ever since it kind of made a splash at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year. And that's a film by Lee Chang-dong, and it stars Steven Yeun and Yoo Ah-in and Jun Jung-so. And it's a Korean film based off of a Haruki Murakami short story. It's about a young man who's unemployed and is kind of a little mild-mannered, not and kind of aimless in life, who runs into this girl who tells him that she grew up next to him, but he doesn't remember her at all. But after, like they strike up an affair, he becomes obsessed with her, and immediately she leaves for like a trip to Africa. And but when she comes back, she's in the arms of a rich sort of playboy played by Steven Yeun, who is phenomenal in this film. He's plays like this like sociopathic, like hypnotic character really well. And this is a film that I think is the best cinematic realization I've seen of a Haruki Murakami book, in that you're not really sure where it's going, you're not really sure what's happening, and you're not sure if you trust what's happening on screen, but you just love where it takes you. It feels very lyrical and hypnotic, like I said before. And it also has shades too of Hitchcockian thriller, especially Vertigo in a lot of ways. So but it's not really like a thriller either. It's so slow burning, pun not intended, but I'll go with it. That it just it like slowly builds until like this paranoia like settles in with you, and you finally realize that like this actually is kind of a thriller, and you've been unsettled this entire time. So it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I think Chris already also saw it too, at TIFF, right?
Yes, I did. It's so good. I actually just got a screener of it, and I can't wait to rewatch it soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, this is one of those films that I have to catch up in this last month of the year and see. Not to derail this whole conversation, but I wanted to ask you guys, like, how many movies do you think you need to see in a year to be actually considered like a film fanatic? Because I feel like I mostly
as many movies as Chris sees.
Really? I feel like most years I see like 100 to 150, but this year it's been so like Jacob. What are your thoughts on this matter? Like, how many movies like to be considered like a film nerd? How many movies do you need to see in a given year?
I'm really hesitant to answer this because I have not counted my movies I've seen this year for this very reason. I don't want to feel bad or feel, or if I'm doing that poorly or feel above somebody else. But I feel like,
like two a week. Is that 100?
Maybe, yeah. I'd say maybe 100 is a baseline for like staying a part of the conversation. I feel like it's probably around. I'd say I'm probably hovering between 150 and 200 if I had to guess. I have no idea, but I'd say like. Yeah, 100 feels like the you are staying on top of things number.
Brad, any thoughts on this?
I mean, when I used to keep a more solid track of like all the movies that I'd seen in a given year, including when I would see movies from a given year in the years that followed it, my number usually ended up around like somewhere between 120 and 150 consistently. Yeah. But like, so I don't know. I think 100 is a good idea because at that point you're seeing basically 2 movies a week, 2 new movies a week, and a lot of people don't have, time for that, like, or make time for that like we do. So I think that's probably a fair number.
HT, any thoughts on this?
I don't know either because I haven't kept track of the movies I've seen since like July, I just kind of dropped off on Letterboxd, and after I saw Leave No Trace, which I kind of like because it feels like that movie was so good, I just died afterwards and I saw no other movies. But yeah, I guess the 100 number is a solid ballpark. I would like to have over 100, just because there's so many movies that come out in a year, and yeah, I feel like that's a good estimate.
I use Letterboxd and I rate the stuff on Letterboxd just because at the end of the year it's easy to go back there and be like, when I'm making my top 10 list, re-examine everything I've seen. Ben, Chris, do you have any thought? I feel like no one has a strong feelings on how many movies you really need to see to be considered
I feel like it's like a gatekeeper type of thing, you know?
I'm talking about maybe maybe I should reframe this in the sense of we are writing about films and we are writing about film from in a level of authority that we are seeing enough films that we know are shit, right? So how many movies should we see a year to be at that level?
Oh God, it's tough because I don't know. I keep worrying about sounding like a gatekeeping. No matter what I say, I don't want to, because I know there are people out there who are film fans and they are film fanatics and they just don't have the opportunity to see as many movies. And I don't want to tell that person you're not a real film fan, man. So.
Yeah, I think maybe it just comes down to the way that you engage with the movies. Maybe it's not so much the quantity of movies that you see, but the quality of your engagement with them and the way that you think about them and analyze them and spend time, thinking about stuff like that. Maybe we shouldn't put a number on it, but just value the level of intelligence that goes into thinking about a movie, because that's something that can get lost in the mix. If you see 500 movies this year, if you just let them go in one year and out the other, who gives a shit at the end of the day?
100%. Okay, we're gonna get back to HT. You've been rewatching a bunch of stuff too.
Yeah, so Ariana Grande released her Thank You Next video on Friday, and it was an ode to all these early 2000s, late 90s. Bring It On was, I don't know if it was late 90s films that were formative for a lot of the millennials of this generation. And so movies like Bring It On, 13 Going on 30, Legally Blonde, Mean Girls, all of those films. And they had she had little cameos of actors from those films in her music video. And after watching that video, I got in the mood to want to watch all of the movies in that video. Unfortunately, only Legally Blonde was available on streaming for free. It's on the YouTube free movies, actually. I think we wrote about that on a while ago, and YouTube is offering a bunch of free films. So Legally Blonde is available for free on YouTube. And I watched that and just had so much fun rewatching it and just drinking tons of wine on a Friday night. It's still such a great feminist movie, and it's really ahead of its time, honestly, in the way that it depicts a woman played by Reese Witherspoon who, gets into Harvard to follow a boy, but she does it of her own smarts and her own brilliance, and realizes that she deserves better, and she is her own independent woman and stuff like that. It's so empowering, and there's also a little bit of a Me Too sort of through subplot in there too, where she gets harassed by the professor, which if this was remade today, God hope not. It would have probably be focused on more, which would have been really interesting. So I enjoyed rewatching that and just drinking a lot of wine while I was watching it. And so afterwards, I decided to watch more rom-coms.
Before that, I'm very curious. How is the experience of watching a movie on YouTube with ads?
I actually didn't have ads.
Oh, there was no ads. Okay.
Yeah, I put it on my TV through the Chromecast, and I didn't get any ads.
Crazy.
So, yeah.
So, pro tip. Okay, so
Maybe I was drunk and I didn't tell, but whatever.
What other romantic comedies did you watch?
Yeah, so I followed it up with the Christmas Prince sequel from Netflix called The Christmas Prince: The Royal Wedding, which was a film I was ironically looking forward to, and I decided just to put it on because I was already like halfway through my wine bottle. And after watching like 10 minutes of it, I realized I remembered nothing of the first film, and I think it was because I was also drunk while watching it the first time, and fell asleep halfway through. And the same thing happened with the Christmas Prince, the Royal Wedding, because I just watched like maybe 20 minutes and was like, this is fun, and then I just fell asleep. So that was my Friday night.
Well, Creed 2 and Burning are in theaters now. Legally Blonde is apparently available on YouTube. The Christmas Prince, The Royal Wedding on Netflix, you said? Netflix. And you can finally see Aquaman later this month.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. Brad, what have you been watching?
I got around to seeing Ralph Breaks the Internet, and I was pretty much pleased with it. Didn't love it as much as the first movie, but this one still is really funny, has a lot of heart. The depiction of the internet here, even though people had complained that it has a similar premise as the Emoji Movie, this does it infinitely better in a much more clever way. The animation in the 6 years since the first Wreck-It Ralph has progressed so much that like things look so much better than they did even in the first movie. It's amazing how animation evolves in such a short time period like that. And yeah, it's I'm not sure that I think like toward the end it kind of loses its luster a little bit. I wasn't too much of a fan of the ending, but I do like the central conceit of what happens with the relationship between Ralph and Vanellope. It felt like a topic that really isn't usually covered in kids movies, and I kind of like when Disney or whoever goes outside of the box for these kinds of movies and tackles a subject that isn't so obvious and isn't so easy to convey in movies like that. A lot of times they go for the easier sell when it comes to positive themes and messages for kids, but I thought this one was a really good one. And then I also got around to seeing Green Book, which I enjoyed pretty well. The performances are fantastic, and Viggo Mortensen is great in it. Mahershala Ali is outstanding. And we have an article on Slashfilm about this from Candice Frederick. I can see how the movie is problematic for Black people specifically, because the movie is meant to depict a time when it was difficult for Black people to travel in the Deep South, and the Green Book is this companion book that kind of showed them safer places that they could stay, where they were surrounded by other Black people and wouldn't encounter any bigots and be in danger and things like that. But the entire movie is shaped by the perspective of Viggo Mortensen's character, who's Tony Lip, who's this Italian guy. He himself is kind of a cliche, but as I understand it, that's very much how this guy was. And at first he's racist, but obviously this whole road trip with Mahershala Ali, who is this very refined and upscale genius piano player going on a tour of the Deep South and playing at all these rich white country clubs and parties. They come to have an understanding of each other, but the entire perspective of this is through the white guy character, and it kind of molds any significance that the story might have otherwise had. And Peter Farrelly, who is the co-director of movies like Dumb and Dumber and There's Something About Mary, taking his first dramatic turn here, he kind of, I don't know, it feels like it's the wrong way to tap into it. And he really made this more about, this surface level story where there's this friendship that blossoms between this Black guy and this white guy, and it's very basic, but at the same time, it is so charming, and Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen are so good that I couldn't help but still enjoy it, but I still recognize the significant flaws that it has because of how it's presented and what it focuses on.
Yes, and you also watched some Christmas movies?
Yeah, so my girlfriend she's actually from Africa. She was lived in Zimbabwe for a lot of her life. She's been in the United States for 11 years now. She's where she's lived, but because of that, she didn't have a lot of access to a huge wealth of pop culture like we do here in America. So some of the stuff she experienced through bootleg videotapes, or when movies would arrive in theaters very late down there. And so there's a lot of stuff that she had missed out on that she vaguely knows about and understands the cultural significance and that kind of thing, but never really watched it. Like, for example, I just introduced her to Jurassic Park earlier this year because she had never seen it. And she was wary because she had seen, been dragged to like Jurassic World by siblings and cousins and didn't like it. I'm like, well, you need to see this because, it's completely different. And so sure enough, she loved it. And so I've been introducing her to movies like that she's kind of missed out on. And since it's Christmas, I sat her down to watch both National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and A Christmas Story, which are two of my favorite Christmas classics, go-to movies that I watch with my family that I watch, probably twice during the entire Christmas season. And she really liked both of them. We had a good laugh, and I never cease to laugh during certain scenes in these movies. And she thought A Christmas Story was definitely a little weirder and definitely picked up on some of the more dated and culturally worrisome aspects of A Christmas Story. But also enjoyed Christmas Vacation as well, just because of how outlandishly funny it is and how great Chevy Chase and Randy Quaid are in that movie. So it's been stuff like this. It's been really fun for me to introduce movies like this to her and get her perspective as somebody who didn't grow up watching them and hasn't seen them at all.
Yeah, I love both of those movies. I usually watch both of them around the holiday season. Actually, I sent into the Slack channel, I'm not sure if you saw this, Jacob, but someone in Austin had a display outside their house inspired by Christmas Vacation that actually had someone calling the cops because it looked like someone was like hanging off the roof while, installing the lights.
That is the least surprising Austin story I've ever heard.
Yeah. Okay, so Ralph Breaks the Internet and Green Book are now in theaters. Christmas Vacation and A Christmas Story are available streaming where?
They're not available to stream for free anywhere. We just rented them from Amazon Prime.
Okay. Ben, what have you been watching?
In addition to Into the Spider-Verse, I had a chance to sit down and watch the new Netflix movie from the Coen brothers, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and I really enjoyed this. It was one of those that Jacob was talking about with Suspiria, or with The Favorite, rather, sort of feeling like it might be homework, and I had kind of heard mixed things about the movie and kind of thought that it might be homework in terms of just like, oh, it's another Coen brothers movie, but I don't know if this one's going to be up to snuff, really. It's like an anthology that tells, I think it's 6 stories over the course of just over 2 hours, and it all takes place in the American West. And I ended up really, really liking this movie. I think most of the stories I really appreciated what they're going on. It's a gorgeously shot film, even though there's like some really blatant, weird-looking CG in it. I think even with those sort of outlier moments, the rest of the movie, like the vistas and the it's typical of Western cinematography, but it's gorgeous to look at, and the performances are all really enjoyable. Tim Blake Nelson as the titular Buster Scruggs in the first one is particularly great. It really gets off to a great sort of surprising foot in the very beginning of the movie, and then there are some that are some of these like anthology entries or whatever are a little bit more inscrutable than others, but I think there's enough craft on display. There's enough greatness in the writing and the way that the Coens create dialogue for their characters that it's easy for me to recommend that if you're even remotely a Coen Brothers fan, that this movie is worth checking out. I think there's one part in particular that involves Liam Neeson, one of the little shorts that I was reminded a lot of Inside Llewyn Davis, which I talked about rewatching relatively recently, and just the idea of that scene in Llewyn Davis where he goes to Chicago and sits there and sort of like pours his heart and soul into the song for like a record producer, and the guy just ends up saying, I don't really see much money in this, and it's just this transactional relationship that is just like completely like stalled before it even begins. I feel like that's a theme that the Coen brothers come back to over and over again. The idea of the masses not appreciating art when it's being delivered to them. And I think you can read some of that into The Ballad of Buster Scruggs if you want to. If you're looking for it, I feel like that theme is there. So I'd recommend it. It's on Netflix right now.
Very cool. Let's move on to what we've been eating. Last week, I forgot to talk about this, but while I was having my week of splurging on food before I went back on my diet, I did go to the AMC theater, and I've been on a diet ever since they've had like their like really new offerings. and I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. Jacob, you probably haven't because you go to the draft house. But they now offer 3 different kinds of popcorn. So they offer normal popcorn, they offer caramel corn, they offer this nacho cheese popcorn that has the Flaming Hot Cheetos in them. And they also offer a popcorn bucket that you can combine 2 of those flavors into one bucket. Now, I went up there, I was hungry, so I went up there and I ordered one of these buckets where you could combine the flavors. I thought they were just going to throw, 2 of those different flavors of popcorns or varieties of popcorns into a bucket, but what they actually do is they put a divider in the popcorn bucket, so half the bucket is one thing and half the bucket is the other thing. And I got the caramel corn and the nacho cheese Flaming Hot Cheetos varieties together, which is, I think, a little bit of a conflict of flavors there because you got the sweet and you got the spicy. But I was wondering what you guys think of this. Like, should like a chain theater be offering like an option to have 2 different kinds of popcorn? I guess it makes sense if like you and your spouse or significant other want different things, right? But I can't recommend myself eating handfuls of caramel popcorn with these Flaming Hot Cheetos popcorn at the same time. It does not mix well.
It's a weird question to ask. Be like, should we be mixing popcorns at the movie theater? It's like this is the question that they ask. Like, wait a minute, should couples be sleeping in the same bed? Like, it's just a thing, But I will say, I think that the caramel corn with the nacho Flaming Cheetos one was probably a bad choice. But the cheese popcorn with caramel corn, that's a normal thing. It's actually called, I think it's the Chicago mix is what it's called, because I believe Chicago is the one that made it like a thing, and it's very popular here. Even if you were at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago, they have like a stand that sells the popcorn where it's the cheese popcorn and caramel corn together, all mixed together. So it's a normal thing. That it's a combination of the salty and sweet, which it kind of works. I can't imagine it works well with the Flaming Cheetos, since that spice kind of makes it a little bit weird, and I don't like Flaming Cheetos. But I think I like that movie theaters are offering it. I think the variety is nice.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's available at AMC theaters. Maybe not all AMC theaters, but at least all the AMC theaters that I've been to in LA. Brad, you're always eating something new and unique. What have you been eating this week?
Haven't really eaten much unique. I've gone to some cool restaurants here, nothing like mind blowing or anything like that. But I did learn that Utah does have this, and it's not necessarily unique to just Utah, but it is pretty abundant over here as opposed to everywhere else. It's called apple beer, and it's not actually beer. It's not like a Red's apple ale or an Angry Orchard or something like that. It's more like an apple soda, basically. And so I found out that actually there's a wide variety of soft drinks options available here in Utah. And my girlfriend was telling me that it's largely because the Mormon population, the part of their religion is not drinking alcohol, really. And so because of that, they've made a much larger, wider variety of drinks so that they have, more options, since they're not really drinking a lot of alcohol. And so they have this thing here. It's called apple beer. They have it at certain restaurants, have it available as like a fountain drink. They have it in bottles. They have it in cans. And it is so good. And it's actually not all that bad for you, you could say, because it's caffeine free, it's gluten free, and it's made with pure cane sugar. So it's not one of the worst soft drinks you can get, and it's extremely tasty. It's basically like drinking carbonated apple juice. It's so good.
Very cool. Apple beer. Where can you get that other than where you found it?
If you go to the Apple Beer website, which is just applebeer.com, they have a store locator of where you can find it. It looks like it's not super easy to find in every area. Like, I looked in my area over in the Midwest, and the closest one to me was down in Indianapolis, which is like a 2.5 hour drive for me. So it's not the easiest to find in all areas of the country, but just go look on the website and see if you can get it near you and give it a shot, because it's really good.
Very cool. Now let's move on to what we've been playing. Jacob, you are the lone gamer this week. What have you been playing?
I had a game night last weekend, and most games played were stuff I discussed in the show before, but I want to talk about a new game called Welcome 2. that kind of blew me away. It's very fun. It's from a genre of game called Roll and Write. And the earliest version of a roll and write game would be Yahtzee. The kind of a roll and write game is where dice are rolled in the middle of the table, and using the options in the middle of the table, you make choices on your own and shape your strategies on your own player sheet. I think that's kind of the loose idea of what this genre of game is. And in the past few years, the roll and write games have become increasingly more ambitious and interesting, and I'm using this basic template to do really cool things. And Welcome to is a roll and write game without dice. Instead of dice, there are various card combinations that come out. And the theme of this game is that you are a neighborhood designer. You're trying to build the perfect suburban neighborhood, and your player sheet is a whole bunch of lots, blank lots. And when the card combinations come out, there are house numbers, and you can put them into the blank house slots in ascending order. So each row of houses can be 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can skip and go from 1 to 3, but then you have nowhere for a 2. So you gotta play very craftily based on the numbers as they come out and try to select the best chances you have of putting numbers in the order that will satisfy your strategy. And there are also, but the thing is, there are numerous other different abilities that come out with the house number cards. It all sounds like there's a lot going on, and there is at first. Took my group maybe 15 minutes to really latch on to how to play. It's only a half-hour game, and by the time it was over, everybody kind of really got it. And you just want to put your numbers in the right places while using other abilities to manipulate those numbers to get your neighborhood built. That's the game in a nutshell. But there are many ways to do that, and it's a lot of fun. And even though it's a pretty straightforward game, the theme allows it so you can look at your neighbor and see, like, oh, your neighborhood's really crappy. Everybody laughs and everybody compares their neighborhoods and has a really good time. We had a really fun time with this. It's only like a $30 game. It's not expensive, and it can have a high player count. And once everybody learns it, it's pretty straightforward and simple. It has that European design thing where it was from a French designer. So there is not a lot of text on the reference cards to help you learn how to play. What there is lots of graphics, and this is so it can be printed in multiple languages without the need to translate great swaths of reference text. And once you learn what everything means, some symbology-wise, it's really useful. But there's that hump when you first start to figure out what all these arrows mean. But that's Welcome to. It is a really excellent game. It's available now, and maybe a little too complex for younger kids, but definitely a good family game, especially people who are a little open-minded to a slightly more complex, family game. But on the other end of the spectrum, I've been reading a lot of Achtung Cthulhu RPG manuals, and this is this Achtung Cthulhu is a series from Modifius Entertainment, and it pretty much feels like it was catered to me. Like someone has said, what can we make an RPG line to appeal directly to Jacob over at slashfilm.com? And what it is it says, what if the Call of Cthulhu RPG line, based on H.P. Lovecraft's world of monsters and creatures and unknown dread, but what if we took that and put it in World War II? And what if we designed a series of manuals that added additional rules for Call of Cthulhu games and added additional scenarios and lore where it says lets you role play during World War II? So it's a combination of extremely nerdy Lovecraftian elements, ideas, monsters, creatures, suggestions, mythology, letting you pick and choose to build adventures, but also extremely realistic, extremely detailed history of World War II campaigns and fronts. So it's you say, okay, you want to have a supernatural adventure on the Eastern Front in this particular year of World War II. Okay, here's what's going on in that year, in that region, and here are a bunch of monsters that could conceivably be there. Have fun and build your campaign. So it's a combination of like really intricate military history and really intricate Lovecraft stuff, which like scratches so many of my itches. It's so satisfying. I don't know if I'll ever get a game of this together. Who knows? I would love to. But just reading through like the details of the contrast between the history and the non-history, and imagining mashing together is a whole lot of fun. And like so, I get pleasure from reading these manuals, even I can't get the game to the table. But they're a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure a new edition's on the way, which is going to render all my current editions null and moot unless I find ways to hack them to work with the new stuff. But I'm having so much fun just reading them.
Very cool. And that is called
Octung Cthulhu.
Yeah, I was going to pronounce it, but I decided I could not. Okay, we have reached the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find all of our work on slashfilm.com and in our various social media profiles. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com. And you can also send your questions for life advice, corner with Chris Evangelista there as well. That's peter@slashfilm.com. Please leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on the air. And please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, Peter, we can't end the show yet. Do you know what time it is?
Yeah, I know what time it is.
It is time to read from the book, the gargantuan book of insult, offense, and effrontery by Louis A. Sefian.
Right. Do we have to?
Oh yeah, we have to. Especially, I've been encouraged by Twitter. Some people say this is the highlight of their entire show.
I love that we're like giving our like reactions to movies, but no, they just care about you reading a joke out of an old book.
Well, Peter, I've randomly opened to the speakers section, and all you need to get your second wind is to say, "And now, in conclusion." Well, Ben, I heard that sigh. As a speaker, you're like a ship. You toot the loudest when in a fog.
Jacob, these are getting worse. Somehow. I didn't think it was possible.
It's just so funny how niche these are.
How is this book reprinted in, like, recent times?
No, but HT, her speech is like a wheel. The longer the spoke, the greater the tire. Hey, Chris, your speech is like a bad tooth. The longer it takes to draw it out, the more it pains.
Wow.
And Brad, you need no introduction. What you need is a conclusion.
I like that one.
That one's actually good.
Classic insults.
I feel like one of these days you got to go through this book and actually like find like the best insult in the book and tell us what is according to you, the best of the best.
Well, I randomly opened to the failure page. Let's try right now.
Oh no.
Peter, at 20 you knew nothing. At 40 you've done nothing. At 60 you'll have nothing.
That's just mean.
That's really mean. Oh my god, that's so mean.
That's just so mean. Like that's not even funny.
There's no joke there.
It's just a very cruel put down.
It's just the truth. No.